a more stronger focus on biomedical interventions and structural interventions, and so we begin to see how that has also played a part in the change in landscape. So again, it's something that we see, but it's about the work that we're doing to address those changes as they occur. So one way of doing that is really just looking at leadership, and I'm glad that Lena mentioned that, leadership, it doesn't have to occur from someone who has a leadership title. We all are leaders in some regards, and so we all come with a level of expertise and strength that we bring to the table. And it's a matter of using that as a way of a process of social influence in which a person can enlist the aid and support of others in accomplishing, those particular tasks. And so as we may mention before around the work that we're doing to accommodate those changes of NHOS and HIP here at the Commission, it really includes involving the entire organization to where we can really come to a place of understanding what's going on, but also using our own level of expertise, using our own skill sets as a way to influence others to gain that buy-in, to where we can use that to carry out our own shared purpose, our own shared vision that we may have for the organization.
So now we want to get familiar with 4 key terms as we're talking about leadership. And these are talent pooling, leadership development, management, and education versus evocation. So when we talk about talent pooling, we mean the idea that every organization is basically a pool of talents, a pool of folks who have a variety of skills that are all important in order to carry out the organization's mission. And the idea is that the element of buy-in from staff within an organization will kind of impact how much of an emphasis there is on transferring those skills, on contributing skills to the success of the organization, and on ensuring that everybody in the pool is basically everybody's skills and talents are used to their full potential.
Mm-hmm.
So talent pooling is kind of the first term that we wanted to review. The second term is leadership development, and which has often been described as teaching a man or a person. I added that one. I'll cop to my feminist bit here.
Don't lean on.
Teaching somebody how to fish. So the famous quote about you give a person a fish,
mm-hmm.
you feed them for a day. You teach the person how to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. Or the environmentalist kind of spin on this. You teach a person to fish, and you feed them until the river runs dry because of global climate change. So, however you want to look at it, the idea of leadership development is that it's something sustainable, is that it's something that is a process, not an easy process, a process of transitioning individuals into encouraging them to make independent decisions and to make, and to acquire new skill sets and to promote the decisions that they're making and therefore empowering them as leaders. And that's, as we all know, is easier said than done, but it's thinking about the key characteristics of leadership development, thinking about flexibility and being openness to others' ideas, being open to others' ideas, being non-judgmental, and kind of being a type of leader that truly encourages conversation, that truly values the input of all staff at whatever level they may be. Again, thinking from the perspective that leadership development is a long-term process that needs nurturing and that needs attention, but is rewarding in the end, teaching how to fish. And then there's management. So often we think of leadership and management as the same thing, and it's not. Management is more about management is more essentially about the procedural aspects of making decisions within an organization that, as much as many of us would like for our organizations to be egalitarian, oftentimes they do end up being hierarchical, and they do end up being, we do need that bit of hierarchy in order to delegate decisions, in order to ensure that somebody is there to kind of like monitor what everybody's doing and ensure that we're meeting the goals and objectives of our program together. So the idea is that a manager is somebody who kind of synthesizes information, organizes a group process, organizes a work plan, somebody who's kind of a project manager. And of course, a manager can be a leader and can engage in leadership development, but let's kind of separate those two terms for now. And we have this fun diagram in order to help us do that. And our fun diagram says, that leadership is about relationship building and having, inspiring trust and all of these sorts of empowering kind of impactful activities or how do I say this? Not activities, but empowering and impactful stances in how you work with individuals. And management is about, again, the project, the task, the goals, the objectives, making sure that everything is kind of like working together, that everybody is working together, and that, folks are doing the right thing at the right time. So obviously there's overlap, there can be overlap, but we kind of wanted to present this idea that there is a distinction between leadership and management.
I like that. And then we have Evocation, education. And so this makes me think of Oprah's life class. And the reason I bring that up because, you see both of these show up in that. And so when we're talking about Evocation, it's really around understanding that, we have, the leaders see potential in you, and they see your skill sets. And sometimes we may not see what our leaders may see or what others may see in us because we tend to be critical of ourselves. This is just a good way for the leader to identify that and then just find a way to pull that out in you. So to work with you to kind of to work with you so you can have a better understanding of who you are and your skill sets and how you show up. It's also another way to process how it is that you're feeling, how it is particular situations, and how you want to kind of address those particular situations. And so from your own experiences, from a leader standpoint, or even the staff, you're able to kind of get a feel for what's working and what's not working. So what's right or what's wrong in the situation. And again, it's based upon your experience as you take on the situation. And with education, it's more around having those teachable moments. So I think about Oprah Winfrey during those master classes or life classes, and she has those aha moments. Well, there's a teachable moment that just occurred there. And so it's really around, teaching the individual, filling them with different ideas, and providing them with those concepts and beliefs. It also allows you to kind of get a feel for what's factual information and what's maybe fiction. And so that's pretty much the definition of those two, and this shows how those two show up different. And as a situational leader, you'll find yourself providing both of those depending upon the situation and the task at hand that you may have as you're working with the staff.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So, questions that leaders can actually ask themselves moving forward, and it's something that, I charge all of us to do, is really asking, what is my leadership development process? And also, how is my leadership process adaptive, responsive, and reflective? Again, as a leader, it's really understanding that you're going to work with each individual as their unique individual, as their unique self. And so we're going to know that we're going to take on their challenges, we're going to take on those various situations that they may be in or we find ourselves collectively in, that we're going to address those differently. And so we have to understand that we're going to be flexible, and by being flexible, it allows us to be adaptive, responsive, and reflective. But also, we have to find a way to understand our leadership development process as we're working with those who come to us for leadership guidance, who may come to us because we have now influenced them and they've gained buy-in to our vision or what is that we see will be great for the agency or organization moving forward. And so this is why we want to ask those particular questions, because how we show up is how people will receive us, and that's what allows us to know if we're going to gain that buy-in or not. So always think about leadership and understand it is a social influence, and so that's why you want to have to ask yourself these two particular questions, because it allows you to see how you show up and what can be done moving forward and how that may impact your organization as you lead it through these particular changes that have occurred. So
we've been through a few definitions here and some ideas, and we wanted to kind of pause and see if there are any questions or any comments that folks want to offer. You can, if your line is muted, you can press *7, or you can chat using your chat box. So, did anybody hear anything that kind of resonated with them in terms of these definitions and things that we went over before we jumped into situational leadership? All right, so we're moving on.
So this diagram is pretty funny. And so it really shows how situational leadership may show up. In this particular instance, you have someone who actually approached the staff and asking about the division officer, like, why is he sweeping the hallway? And, of course, the staff feels really good because he feels that he's empowered him. And so his reason for empowering him, he feels like he has, is because he noticed that the division officer was more so, I guess, complaining, and so he wanted him to find a way to change his particular situation, that he has the power to change that. So another task that he decided to take on was sweeping, and what he do with him, he kind of coached him through that and showed him how to sweep. And so here's the boss, like, we didn't send you, to a leadership school to kind of do those particular things. But again, it shows how leadership, situational leadership does show up, because it keeps the staff involved and makes them feel valued or part of the team. Because we do understand that outside of our job description, we bring in other skills too. And if we really use those other skills that they're bringing, it makes them feel as if they're a part of this process, and that they feel as though their input does matter. Again, especially if we're looking at the changing landscape and we're trying to find ways to sustain our organization. Sometimes some of the staff that we've hired may have strong ties to the community, so they can understand some of the needs of the community and may say, hey, let's offer new ideas. Let's offer new activities or new services. Or it could be, let's try to do something more innovative that allows us to stand out. And you may have that staff person who's very creative and can think of a great innovative idea and have carried that out to where it actually works, to where we can secure additional funding, gain additional partners, but these are different ways that we can work to sustain an organization. And so, as I made mention, with situational leadership, again, it was a theory that was developed by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard. And as we mentioned before, there's really not a single best style of leadership. Again, it's about you understanding that you're going to take on each situation different, and that you find yourself showing up different, and you enlist the assistance of staff to help you carry out or help you address these particular changes as they occur. And you use it based upon what expertise or what strengths that the staff or skill sets that the staff brings to the table. So as you see, that it's very task relevant, and some of our most successful leaders are those that adapt their leadership style to the maturity of the individual. And looking at this nice situational leadership model here, and we're going to go more into detail about this, but it goes back to what we talked about with the definition of situational leadership, and understanding that one size fits all, that there's no such thing as one size fits all. And depending upon the situation, various levels of leadership and management are necessary, and how the leader must first identify their most important tasks or priorities, and then second, the leader must consider the readiness level of their followers by analyzing the group's ability and willingness, depending on the level of of certain variables. And so with this, what you notice is that the leader is going to as a situational leader, you may find yourself as more of directing, coaching, supporting, and delegating, and that depends based upon the maturity level of the staff. So as we talk about this further, we'll really dive more into this. But the maturity level can be more so around a staff who may appear as like an enthusiastic beginner, someone who's more of a delusional learner, a reluctant contributor, or a peak performer. And so based on the maturity level, you know which supportive behavior as a situation leader you're going to show up as. And so this does a great job in breaking down the diagram we just saw before. The first side, on the left-hand side, you see more of the developmental levels and maturity. So if you notice, you see D1, which has more of a low competence and high commitment. And again, that's more of your enthusiastic beginner. So think about someone who just started at the job. And so you find yourself doing more hands-on work with them. You find yourself giving more of, providing more coaching for them. Providing more coaching. Coaching with that particular individual. And then when you have your some competence and low commitment, which is more of your delusional learner. I messed up. So with the low competence, high commitment, the enthusiastic beginner, that's more directing. Again, you find yourself giving more directives. You find yourself more involved with this particular staff. Again, because they're new, and so they're trying to understand the ins and outs of the organization, which is why we have to give those clear directives to the staff. And then you have someone who been on maybe, let's say, about 3 months, and so there's some competence there, but it may be more of a low commitment because they're still trying to understand the ins and outs of the organization, the ins and outs of their own roles and responsibility here. So they're considered more of that delusional learner. You find yourself doing more coaching with them. And so with the coaching, it's more so around just walking them through this process, being able to kind of, this is where you kind of provide more of those, again, you're still in that teaching phase. And so not only are you teaching, but you're moving yourself to now allowing them to process, or you are processing together, so that's how you get to that coaching, to that place of coaching the individual. Followed by the moderate, D3, which is more of the moderate, high competence variable commitment, which is more of your reluctant contributor. So this is someone who has been here for a while, who now has a very high confidence level, who does know a lot of the ins and outs, and still learning more and open to learning more. And so you find yourself supporting this staff person. And so with the support, and what does that really look like? So that looks like being able to be there when they have questions, being there to, if they're looking for assistance, to kind of offer that support to them. You also may find yourself as a cheerleader as you go through this too, because they're looking for someone who can also validate the work that they're doing, make them feel okay, and also affirm their work too. And then you have the high confidence, high commitment, which is more of your peak performer. This is the person I'm trying to be in life. So you find this person who really excels at majority of the tasks that have been given to them, and you find yourself just really delegating the tasks to them. And so it's more hands-off with them, and you find yourself from a macro perspective than a micro. So when you look at D1 and D2, you see more micro, and with D3 and D4, it's more macro, where it's more hands-off, and you find yourself just being able to assign the task to them, and you trust that they can be able to do it, as opposed with the D1 and D2, because they're new and they're still understanding, you find yourself working with them more hands-on to help them build up their own level of confidence and their own level of commitment to the task at hand.
So, for those of you on the line who are who manage staff, does this resonate with you? This model of differential leadership styles with different levels of staff maturity?
Love to hear from you, to just get a feel for what, what it is that you all are doing, and then we can all learn from each other as well.
I know it definitely resonates for me, in my experience of managing staff. I've definitely had experiences with all of these different types of learners and maturity levels with folks, and it's, I've often said that it's about kind of like connecting with people on different levels individually, and while still trying to make sure that everyone is respected and everyone is learning at the pace that they want to be learning. So, and also while making sure that the work gets done. So you can't always be coaching and supporting. You also have to come to a point where you have to get it done, right?
And I think as we talk about these changes, and we're looking at how do we sustain our program, sometimes we may find ourselves, having to, even if we have staff who've been on board for years, we may find ourselves going back, and then, staff are all becoming enthusiastic beginners, and we find ourselves directing more because they're also trying to understand, the changes that have occurred, and also maybe trying to wrap their head around it, because, again, sometimes when we have change, it comes to a level of stress. And so we find ourselves, in a place where we feel stuck because we're unsure of how to move forward with this. And so, again, we may find ourselves as leaders doing more directing when it comes to these changes. But as we move forward in time, what we begin to see is that we remove ourselves from doing more of the directing and coaching to where it becomes more supported and delegating as we look at sustaining a particular program. Again, because by then staff have understood the changes, as well as ourselves as leaders who have understood the changes, have a better understanding of the goals and objectives of NHOG, and also better understand, what is high impact prevention and what does that really look like. It makes it easier for us to pretty much align our services, program services, with the goals and objectives of NHOG and of HIP. And so, as I made mention, that we may go, as we first become introduced to NHOG and HIP, we may find ourselves more in the D1, D2, which means we may need more of direct and coaching. But as we become more familiar with it, and we begin to do this work, and it becomes something that we do with our eyes closed, we find ourselves more in the support and delegating phase as leaders when we work with staff who are in D3 or D4, the reluctant contributor or the peak performer.
So we have a few comments on the chat, which I've rebroadcast to everyone because sadly you can't all see each other's chats. Such is the system, but we have a few folks who are definitely agreeing here around what is around this model and what does it mean to work as a director or manager with a variety of different staff, taking into account intellectual maturity and various leadership traits that can match that.
So our leadership style choices, and this pretty much goes back to that supportive behavior, and what does that look like for us? How are we going to show up as leaders based upon the various situations that may occur or the maturity level of the staff? So the first one is more of the directing, and it's more involved management techniques. With this picture here that you see on the screen, it provides more specific guidance for the task with direct and immediate follow-up. So again, when we do our, for instance, let's think about supervision. And so if you have a staff that's new, you may find yourself conducting more supervision as opposed to a staff who may have been here for a while. And so what we're looking at is a professional development plan, organization orientation. That's what you find yourself doing with the staff initially. And then from there, you begin to look at maybe a daily task list or look at weekly goals, as well as how that's going to, or even the monthly report. So these are things that you can look at and get a feel for where the staff is and in their progress, and how well are they able to kind of achieve the tasks that have been given to them. Also, as you're working with enthusiastic beginner, one thing we want to do is provide clear instructions. Again, they're new to this, so there's a learning curve that's there, and so they want to understand the ins and outs of not only their job but the organization. They're trying to connect the various dots, and so that's why we want to have clear instructions and also provide a clear understanding of the goals, objectives, and necessary outcomes. And so when we're looking at directing, we're working with the enthusiastic beginner. And so, again, you may find yourself doing more ongoing supervision. You may find yourself having to provide clear goals and objectives. You also want to work with them around like setting weekly tasks and maybe like daily tasks that goes along with those weekly goals, which then can show the progress they made as they submit their monthly report. The next one is the coaching. And so this one more so around where you are being directive, but you're also a level of support that's there too. And so this is really so for people who have some confidence but lack commitment, and so they need direction, inspiration, and supervision because they're still relatively new in the position and and not as experienced as our individuals who may have a high confidence level and a high commitment level. And so they also need support and praise to build their self-esteem, involvement in decision-making to restore their commitment. And so I was just thinking about motivational interviewing. Think about someone who may, who's trying to change a particular behavior, but may not have the skills or the tools, or may not have the know-how in doing that. And so this is when you want to work with that individual to kind of identify, have them identify what skills they can, or what skills or tools they can use to kind of get them to work, change that behavior. But they're relying on you more so to kind of coach them through that process, to really coach them if they make a mistake and help them kind of learn from that. Also, but to give them praises and some level of ongoing support, just so they can build up their own self-efficacy or their own confidence level to feel as though they can actually be at a place of a higher level of competency in doing this particular work. And then for your support level, this is where you have more so the manager begins to assign the task and provide some direction, but leaves how the task is done up to the actual staff. And so this technique is appropriate for a skilled person who might need some support and guidance in getting the job done. And so when you look at this picture here, it's more so around, you provide a process for minor or frequent issues. You see yourself creating more of a tutorial or reference materials. Again, things like that just to help the staff feel like they have that support or that they have some type of tool or guidance with them as they're doing this work. You're also setting some expectations, especially for response times, and you put a face on the support team. And so it's really around like what does support look like. You kind of help them identify that, and it's maybe a dialogue between you and the staff to really got to understand your expectations around support and what does that look like for both of you all. So again, with the support level, this is where you work with the staff who already knows how to do the work. You just laying down some guidance and other resource materials that will be helpful as they carry out the task. But you're not really giving them a directive or coaching them on how to do the work because you know they know how to do the work. And then the last one is delegation, and it's more so around giving the employees the power to do the job. So you know they know the work, you know that they understand the ins and outs, and so now you're just delegating a task to them. And this is where you may want to use some level of direct manipulation or indirect manipulation. With the direct manipulation, it's more so providing the staff with the most favorable options and the reasons why it works. So you kind of downplay other options while you highlight how you have come and pretty much into this conclusion. But if you want to use more of an indirect manipulation approach, you're more so asking for options, which includes your own. You explain why your options works, downplay why it works, but you also downplaying other options, but provide positive reinforcement to encourage more participation later. And then you may also have inclusive manipulation or involve ownership. And so with inclusive manipulation, you're asking for options or invites, or you're asking for other comments or input from the staff. And then the final destination, the final decision actually comes to the supervisor. And then you have your involved ownership, where the decision process belongs to the team. So you pretty much trust the staff in the work that they're doing, but you also trust them on the ideas and their investment to the organization. And again, so with delegation, it can really be about how do you allow the staff to have ownership in the decision-making process, or how they have ownership in the task that's been given to them. But it's also around how can you find a way to manipulate to make sure you still get what it is that you want from the staff without directly having to tell them this is what it is that you want. You just pretty much tell them, hey, this is the task at hand, and you trust that they're able to carry that out.
So this is basically the different levels of kind of participatory decision-making,
Yes.
if, to put it in other terms. So, how are you going to use all this information? So we want to bring this conversation back to program sustainability and what it means to have sustainable organizations and sustainable leadership styles in this brave new world we live in of the National HIV Strategy and HIP and all the changes that have occurred because of that. And so, things to think about as you move forward. How have you used situational leadership to ensure that program services are aligned with the goals and outcomes of NHAS and HIP? So thinking of our own organization and organizations that we work with as capacity building assistance providers, there's often different levels of knowledge and different levels of kind of awareness and experience with all of these different changes. So how can situational leadership be used in order to get all of the employees on the same page and get them to discuss and participate in decision-making that will lead to better sustainability in the new landscape? And then also thinking about how can you use situation leadership in creating agreement or shared purpose with other organizations. So like we mentioned at the beginning, a lot of organizations are shifting, are creating partnerships, are merging or being subsumed into other organizations. We've seen a lot of different kinds of outcomes of what's been going on with the changes, and especially even more so since the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and organizations looking to work much more closely with clinics and other types of healthcare providers in order to ensure that they're meeting the objectives of working more with prevention with positives. And so thinking about different organizations that are partnering or that are merging together, this isn't an MOU. This is a much more sort of integrated, much more collaborative kind of process. And it does mean that organizational culture takes a large precedence here, because it's really about thinking about organizations that for example, that you may have worked with in the past. All organizations have their own sort of culture or character. Some are more egalitarian, some are more hierarchical, some are more about, frontline, the empowerment of frontline staff and getting everybody's buy-in and everybody's support, while others are much more divided in how decision-making happens between frontline staff and management staff. So if you're really going to be working so closely and integrating or even merging with another organization, how can you use situational leadership in order to facilitate the finding that shared space, that shared purpose, without losing both of your organizational kind of identities? So things to think about as you put your message in your bottle. We want to pause once again for any final questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share. We also wanted to let you know that we will be sending out the slides to you all, so you can have them as reference. But any questions, any comments at this time?
Pretty quiet. I think we all got to understand what situational leadership sounds like. Or we still thinking about, maybe still processing.
So Krupa is saying on chat that the most difficult part is if the manager does not have buy-in, and so how does that convey to the staff?
Wow, so, that's a good question. And so as we mentioned before, the difference between, being a leader and being a manager. And so, being a manager just means that you want to ensure that, that we're in compliance. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. But being a leader means that you have that social influence to where you can have folks have that buy-in, to where you can create that buy-in of others to kind of follow and want to be a part of whatever vision that you have. So one thing that can be done, one thing that can happen is maybe, the manager may want to take a moment to kind of better understand the staff and maybe find a way to kind of address each staff as their own unique individual. It may be a point where maybe the manager want to find a way to, again, get to know the staff and get a feel for what their skill sets are, and then what he can do or she do as they begin to communicate what vision they have, or as they're talking about a new particular sustainable strategy that they're looking to implement, is really look at the skills of those staff and say, hey, well, I noticed that you have a strength in this, or I know you made mention that you have a interest in and maybe doing social marketing. That way you can be able to bring them into, whatever idea that you have. It gets just a way for the staff to feel like they are a part of something, which allows them to have more buy-in into that. So maybe just find a way to kind of get to know the staff more, identify what other skill sets they may have that are strengths and that you feel that can be used to sustain your particular program.
I have a quick question. What do you think, or what would you suggest for a new manager of a unit to do to change to change cultures and create more unity within an organization or a unit?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What would you suggest for a culture change within an organization or a unit for a new manager to do?
Oh, that's a good one. Of course, the first thing would be just do more of a culture assessment to kind of get a feel for what is the culture of the assessment. And then you can use those findings as a way to make mention of, from the culture, how is it actually helping the organization move forward, or how is it or if it's hurting the organization. If we talked about in-house and HIP, and we're looking at, there's a stronger need, or they're putting a lot on the need for collaboration and partnership. And so, as Lena made mention before, it's sometimes the culture organization, once you do those, begin to collaborate and partner, you're looking at, it may be a change in the culture of the organization. And so one thing that we want to do is just kind of use that assessment, that cultural assessment, and have a dialogue with the staff to talk about how the culture is actually helping or how it may be hurting the organization or that particular program. And then as a body collectively work together to talk about what new culture or what new shared vision we may have, and how can we create new shared values in this particular relationship that we actually have. How do we use that moving forward to kind of create a new culture of the organization or of the program that can actually help the program or coach or the organization grow or sustain? I hope that answered somewhat.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
So thank thank you all so much for your participation, for your questions and your comments. We hope that this information was useful to you, and we gladly continue this conversation over email. This concludes the webinar, and as we said in the beginning, it would be very, very helpful to us if you could fill out the survey that's going to pop up once the webinar is over. We really appreciate your feedback and your responses, so that that helps us to improve our work as well. And this is our contact information. Like we said, we'd be glad to continue this conversation with you. Please shoot us an email or give us a call, get in touch, and we can talk more about situational leadership or program sustainability, or any other issues that you may have, or any capacity building assistance needs. We'd gladly hear from you. So thank you all again so much, and hopefully we'll see you at our next installment of the Program Sustainability Series, which is in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, yeah, August 8th, I believe is the date, and we'll be doing grant writing, I guess, more so, not I guess, but grant writing more so under the guidance of NHOS and HIP. And so how do you write, a banging, nice grant application or proposal and looking at NHOS and HIP?
So join us then.
Thank you again, y'all.
Thank you.
Yay. They were quiet.
Thank you. Please stand by.